So what I discovered was that with a job, it requires you personally to be there every single day.
Mm.
You are still trading time for dollars.
Welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. And I'm Dr. B, your host. And as always, I am the most luckiest. I don't know if I want to say lucky or God has just ordained it or what it is, but I get to interview some amazing individuals. And as you guys know, we are interviewing Black men this year. I'm doing 100 Black men this year that are making a difference in their communities. They're making a difference in the lives of their families. They're making a difference in the people they interact with because they have stories. And when I think of stories and I think of my own story, sometimes I say, well, I've had a great life. I'm excited about my life and the things that I've been able to do, but it's nothing in comparison to some of the things that the people that I get to interview have done. I think of my life as boring and simple when I hear of some of the things not only that they've had to go through, some of the trauma they may have had or not had, and some of the the people that once they got into their adult life that put roadblocks and barriers and things in their way, and then the perseverance and the overcoming and the as I just Greg, I don't know if you notice, I wrote a book called There Is No Tiger, which is all about overthinking and overcoming, anxiety. And it's all about how do I show up and go, that negative, the real that we play in our mind when we start thinking about what's going to happen. I see people we're in election season right now. We're close to about 3 weeks away from as we're recording this. And as I'm listening to people and hearing people, and they're all telling me about what's going to happen after the election, or what if this person wins in office, or what if this person wins in office, and what's life going to be like? And I'm like, you're way overthinking this. We need to get to that point and do that. And I just finished a book called The Decision Formula that I just finished writing this last week. So I'm in the process of now getting it edited and getting people to look at it and thinking about the decisions that we make and where they lead us to, the disciplines that need to go with those decisions that we make, the cost that goes with those decisions. And so as we talk today, maybe we can jump into some of that. But before we do, I want to know about Greg Gavin. We talked a little bit earlier. I said, Greg, what are you most excited about now? And you know what he told me? He said, I'm excited that I got to wake up. And I'm thinking the same thing. I got up this morning and I opened my eyes and they opened, and then and I moved my feet to the bed and off the bed and onto the floor. And I'm like, my legs still work and my my arms will work. And I was doing my walk. I try to do a 3-mile walk every morning. I'm no longer an athlete that gets to jog them or anything. And one of the things that the NAACP that's here local has us do on Tuesday mornings, we do a morning prayer. So they asked me to do the prayer this morning. As I'm walking, and I'm just thinking about all the things that I'm grateful for. And then I start working and I've been just doing what I'm doing. And then I get to you and you say, I'm thankful that I got up this morning. And so just thinking of the beauty of life and the things that we do. So I want you to start with your story. I want you to start with wherever you want, and then we'll move on from there. And then hopefully we'll have some really good interaction after your story. So again, thank you for being on. Thank you for the willingness to take your time. I know you're busy and you got things that you're doing, but I can't wait to find out more about who you are.
Well, first of all, Brian, thank you very much for having me. This is I consider myself honored here to be asked to share my thoughts, my life, my aspirations, and all with other people. Um, I was born and raised in a city called Springfield, Mass. It's the third largest city in Massachusetts. I always say the same thing when asked about Springfield. It's the birthplace of Basketball Hall of Fame. If you ever read a Dr. Seuss book, it was written there. And if you are firearms kind of person and you ever fired a Smith and Wesson firearm, it's a good chance it was made there. That's also, well, it was the home of Smith and Wesson until Massachusetts tried to control the guns they make, and then they said, "See ya." So that's another story. Spent a lot of my life there. Originally involved in music, all kinds of ways, and that and technology, which kind of, believe it or not, goes hand in hand. It's kind of weird, a lot of musicians who are also IT people,
Mhm.
which seems to be some kind of a synergy between musicians and IT and technology in general. And I'm not quite sure what that is, but it seems to be a lot.
Might be
Spent a lot of
mathematics
my
because
youth.
music is math. Music is math, and so is IT a lot. So maybe it's that logical think part of the brain. That's what I kind of equate it to. I see your
Yeah,
guitar back there, so you probably have this amazing mind that thinks numbers and rhythms and that kind of stuff. That's cool.
that is true because one of the things that I say that I have is digital rain. Because when you're talking to me about your company and you're telling me about what you're trying to achieve, I listen to it from a technological standpoint. Just so you know, kind of fast forwarding here. I have IT managed services company. We design, build, and maintain computer networks, and we also do voice over IP solutions. And have also serve as a CTO for another company I helped start, and we build fiber network. We just completed a fiber network in Alabama, providing fiber to low-income people in the Selma area, and we all know how historic Selma is. But
Mhm.
it was they were in need of it, and I was had a lead role in helping to design that system there. So those are the kinds of things that I do. Like music, I still play, and obviously technology is very big with me, and just art in general. I just love looking at the sky and hearing the birds chirp and that kind of thing.
Oh,
So,
cool.
anyways, yeah,
Um, oh, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
I'm one of four siblings, and there's three of us left. One of us is gone on, but we learned so much from all of them and watching what they do. And I was the musician of the group and traveled quite a bit professionally. So that's where we are now. My goal now is I love business.
Okay.
I'm not really stuck on a particular line of business. I just love the action of starting a business, developing business, sharing business, and one of the things you talked about was helping to mentor. I certainly have been mentored. I was fortunate to really have a very close relationship with some very wealthy and well versed people in Massachusetts who took me under their wing. And actually, he's my Masonic father. I'm a Mason, and so he took me under his wing and showed me he was building highways and airports. And I mean, the guy's a mega millionaire, and so he was able to just discuss with me business and how to start and what was the substantial business, what was the light in the butt business that's not going to really do much for you, and to
Mhm.
be able to differentiate the two, because sometimes we get hung up on things that we think are going to be great, and it's never going to make you a lot of money. And the difference, I think my most recent revelation, well, not recent, but one of the strongest was recognizing the difference between creating a job and creating a business. And that was a big one.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, you think of create, jobs and the things that we do, and being an entrepreneur and being able to be your own boss. I think a couple episodes ago I was really talking to. It might have been Darwin. We were talking together about what it meant to be an entrepreneur and have the responsibility of employees and the things that entrepreneurs think about at night when they go to sleep is, especially when they get going, how am I going to make payroll? How am I going to make sure that the people that I've now taken responsibility for in a lot of respects are taken care of, and the responsibility for their families, and some of them have kids and spouses and responsibilities. So maybe they'll just dive into that a little bit of what did you find out as you were going through that difference between a job and a business, and what are some key points from that?
Well, a job basically is I've created some businesses. Like at one point, I had started a sound company. I did
Hmm.
pro audio. We'd go in and I was able to do some really big name people back in the day, Biggie Smalls, and a bunch of those guys like that. And what I discovered was that with a job, it requires you personally to be there every single day.
Mm.
You are still trading time for dollars, although it's your time now in the sense that you have actually booked yourself out. But as opposed to someone else booking yourself out, you work for a corporation, they book your time to come in and do this function for them, and they pay you for that time. When you are a solopreneur and you've created a job, then you have to be there to swing that hand or hammer, to work that computer, to slap that brush, whatever the case might be. It requires you to be there. When you have truly started a business, as you had alluded to earlier, now you have people working for you, and your concern is to grow the business. So there's working in the business and being that job, and then there's that working on the business, and that's being a businessman. But the businessman wants to grow the business, to employ more people, to educate more people, to empower more people, so that they can obviously enrich themselves, but they get the most precious thing of all, they get time
Mm.
to live life. But most of us spend so much time, 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week, working for someone else, that the time left over, you take for that another 40 hours a week of sleeping, right? And then that other time in between is the time that you have to experience life. And that's, comparatively speaking, is a very small thing. So my mantra has been, how do I stop trading time for dollars in the traditional sense and then empower other people by doing it? So I'm doing good while enriching myself, while freeing myself of having to be in a certain spot at a certain time every day for a certain amount of time, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, it makes so much sense. I had a mentor once, and in one of the metrics that he told me to start measuring when I was trying to decide, because he's saying you're a solopreneur, that you're spending all the, even though they're your businesses and you're the boss, everything has to run through you. And he says, what I want you to really start tracking is when you go to bed at night and you wake up in the morning, how much money did you make when you were asleep? How much, how much
Exactly.
income came in when you weren't
Exactly.
even there and somebody else was doing the things. He said that's when you have a business. When you go to bed at night and you can check your bank account in the morning, you can check your profit and loss statement and go, wait a minute, that had nothing to do. I mean, obviously it had me, putting it together, but nothing to do with the activity that happened from the time you went to sleep to the time you went to bed. That's
Yep.
what you want to build towards when you're building a business. And he says,
Right.
if you continue to build towards another thing that you have to do, it's like this is when we started talking about delegating. And he's like, and if you keep adding things to your plate, all you're going to be is frustrated. You got to find people that you can trust. You have to find people that can do and even probably do it better than you would do it, because you need to think at a different level. So I
Mhm.
love how you said that the job is, even you could have a job and even be the boss or even be the owner and still have a job and not have a business that's happening, right? And then
Yep.
moving on to that thing. So when you do wake up, hey, let me go check that statement or that balance. That is so cool.
Yeah. Or you're on vacation, or traveling somewhere, and you're still making money, and that has been the goal. I got to say this analogy that I have on this. You ever drive by a construction site and you see some guys in the hole with the shovels, and you see there's a guy standing on the side with the clipboard, right?
Uh-huh.
They get the white helmet on, right? And for a long time, I just thought that this guy was just slacking off. He was a slacker, so he's up there. And then I realized that the person in the hole can't really see the direction that they're digging in. So the guy up top is the person that's doing the directing. So as an analogy, it's analogous to the person in the hole is the person that's working in the business, but they can't make designs for the business because they can't see where they're going. The person that's able to get out and have other people do this can now give direction and then begin to dream and strategize about how to get there. So that's my little analogy there.
Wow, that's a really good analogy. And what came in picture in my mind is guy with the clipboard and the white hat is looking and doing things. Then sometimes I see two or three guys that are just standing there while the other guy's digging. So I what are those two or three doing? Did they make it up to the level? Or but I figure that they're waiting for whatever's happening in the hole to happen so then they can go do their part. And that's
Their
probably
part, right?
what's happening. So what a really good analogy. When we think of you kind of started talking about the people you've been able to work with and the things you've been able to do in order to do that and get to those rooms, because they say the if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. And it seems like you've been in some pretty good rooms of building up to what in your identity, because we talk a lot about identity, especially for Black men who kind of feel stuck. When I'm doing the Journey to Freedom in my coaching program and thinking about Black men and what we're doing, sometimes I find a lot of stuck where there might have been things when they were kids that they were able to, when they first went to college, that people mentored them and helped them. And then they actually get into the job force or the workforce or the business force and they start doing stuff and then they get stuck. Their identity isn't congruent with the things that they want to do or the people that they're working with. And they just kind of flounder because they're not able either to get into those rooms or change that identity. How did that evolve for you? How did, maybe you were a prodigy in high school and you just went straight to the business, but for most of us, we had to do some work on us in order to become that person.
Sure. Everybody has their insecurities. I think what gets people stuck and unstuck, well, if to break it down into a little yin and yang, good and bad, stuck, unstuck kind of simplicity here. I think that gets people stuck, first of all, is feeling comfortable. When you like why do a lot of people not change their jobs or move their business forward or even in their personal relationships? Because they're comfortable enough. Maybe there's some things that make them uncomfortable, but they're comfortable enough to tolerate the rest of the stuff that's going on around them. And so, I make okay money, or yeah, my boss is okay, or that kind of thing. And so you don't move because you feel safe. You're comfortable, right? Because when you're an entrepreneur, you don't know if you're going to make $1 tomorrow. So that uncertainty is a very high degree of discomfort. Um, if you have had a good day, and it comes down to ownership. As an entrepreneur, if you had a great day, it's your fault. If you had a bad day, that's your fault too. You
Yeah.
know, so it's that sense of ownership to give that left hand, right hand, up, down, good or bad. That's the thing that people become stuck because they feel comfortable and safe. But it's the risk takers that change the world. That's always true. Because if you look at people out there, I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk personally, but the guy's a disruptor.
Mm-hmm.
He's took industries. We're talking about space now. We've got Starlink thing, so satellites zipping around, giving the internet to anybody. And he's also got the Tesla, all of which said, you can't do this,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is not going to work. Well, obviously, it's working and then some. And so, and that's somebody who dares to think, and I hate to use the term outside the box, but has the tenacity, the balls, if you will, to
Mm-hmm.
just do it different and just say, what the heck. So when I look at entrepreneurs, those are people who have decided that they can take that risk. And for like a lot of Black people, let me tell you a story. We are taught to think in terms of not being to think in terms of let's be safe, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I would tell you this. So when I first started my first company, I wanted to start a sound company, and I named it. I always had a fascination with pyramids. It's on my bucket list to go see. Um, and I went to my mom because I needed a co-signer to buy my first sound system that I was going to rent out. I mean, I already had a plan how to make money. I even had a few customers before I even bought the system. And this is when I had no idea whatsoever about doing about business.
Mm-hmm.
This is just kind of scrapping and kind of scrapping along there. And so I went to my mom, and she says to me, after I explained everything I was going to do, how I was going to do it, the people who already wanted my services, she says, "Boy, what you need to do is stop all that nonsense and go get a job."
Okay. Okay.
right? So already I had a naysayer.
Mhm.
My biggest cheerleader had already
Told you.
dumped buckets of water on my fire,
Hmm.
right? I went to my aunt. She was good to go until I told her I was going to do DJs, and she's highly religious, and that was, you know, blasphemy. So she
Hmm.
couldn't support. My dad, unbeknownst to me, sat in the corner and listened to the whole thing. And he says, he put on the shoes. He says, "You sure you can pay it back?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Let's go." And he signed for me.
Wow.
You know, so this goes to show the vision and how we self-check ourselves. We're taught
Mhm.
this internally. You know, uh, to be honest, how many times have we heard, "Oh, shut up, nigga, you don't know nothing." I
Man.
mean, let's get real,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
You're right.
So that mentality, you can see it with our women sometimes.
Hmm.
You could see it with our parents, our aunts and uncles. So right away, you have this built-in check:
Hmm.
stay in your lane, right? So we have this built-in check. So for us to start thinking in terms of being business people, so now after we got through the firewall of our own friends and family, and I say that point that they become a detriment to you at that point. They're
Hmm.
not fuel for the fire. They're fire suppression, you know. And so then now you get to the world where what's your credit like? All those business questions that you start getting asked. You know, uh, do you have insurance? Do you have, what's your corporate structure? Are you a DBA or LLC? What's your deal? You know, and now you get all this stuff to learn, and nobody's told you about this. And then, particularly of people, I mean, you see them older guys, so people of my age, of my genre, when adults started talking business, we were told to get out. This is grown folks' business,
Hmm.
right? And I think this is still some. I mean, people nowadays is not as much. And I think there's more openness to with your kids, but still, for a lot of black kids, when the first time they hand in money, what do? We
Yeah.
oh man, I got
And
$10. I got $100. Oh my god! And we go scurrying up the store to spend. So we're not taught how to do this. So a lot of the things that for Black people, we have to do on our own, right? So when you get unstuck, now these are these other challenges because you broke through the areas that you're not supposed to be there. And then when you finally get into business, the hardest people for me was my people,
hmm. Yep.
my people. You know, when I was doing sound systems, I was renting out this very large sound system. I mean, you go to Civic Centers, you hang out the ceiling and all that. That was
Mhm.
me.
Okay.
And so um, my people didn't want to pay me. Oh, come on, Gavin. You know me, man. Give me a break, bro. Well, brother, this cabinet that you got your hand on top of, right? I just bought 10 of them at $1,000 each. That amplifier
Right.
you're looking at, you said to tell me nice, that was 2 grand each. Oh, by the way, I got a stack of 10 of them, right? But you want a break. How do I give you a break? Because what you're really telling me is give it to you free.
Hmm.
So once you get to that firewall of people in your own home telling you no, now you got the people who finally acknowledge you and say, okay, you got something that I want, but I'm not willing to pay you.
Hmm. Hmm.
No. And then the same guy, one of the guys that criticized me for my price structure, went to one of our Caucasian brethren, bought a sound system from him, rented a sound system from him. The guy came and did the sound. And then a few weeks later, he came over. The guy who was hired the Caucasian brother came and saw me work, and he said, "Damn, man, I should have got you. You were cheaper."
Oh my
You know,
gosh.
I have, it, wa-
Yeah.
it was one of those things I had to kind of just, take a deep breath and just turn on and walk away. But this is consistent for African American. When we try to do business, now we want the hookup. You got a little corner store, they want a discount on the price, but they go right. They don't say that when they go down there to Mr. Charlie's store.
No, they don't.
They pay the price. If
Yeah.
it's $5 for a can of soup, you pay the $5, you get out. Don't go to the counter and negotiate. You know, so I think going back to your question of getting unstuck, when you get unstuck, then there's people who want to nigga stay in your place, and it's not just the Caucasian people that are doing it. We
Do to each other
ourselves,
all the time.
we try to
Oh, absolutely.
self-regulate each other.
Oh, absolutely. It's that part that you were just saying, that now that you're starting to move up, and I'm here, it's that crabs in the basket, right? How do I let you move forward or encourage you to move forward or help you move forward? It's like, well, you were lucky or you got this, and so you don't need nothing no more. It's that whole, I don't know, it's just the jealousy of it, or the person who's not willing to put in the work, doesn't know how to put in the work to be able to do that. And so you almost have to create a thick skin against the people that you grew up with, a thick skin against the people that you spend time with, and you almost separate yourself from a group of folks just so that you can move forward. And it's sad that we have to do that, but I see that over and over and over again. And so, back to the identity, you're starting to grow and you're starting to get stuff that's happening and moving, and you're able to spend 300 grand on sound systems and that kind of stuff. How do you perpetuate that and continue to change who you are? Were there just by getting great mentors, being around different people? What were you able to do beyond just your internal, I got this drive that's not going to stop me, and to do it, to be able to move into the places where you could really start taking off?
Embrace the pain, because again, there's that discomfort, that sense of failure, those things I talk about. What shuts us down a lot of times is that fear of that discomfort, that pain. And I find that it's kind of like, that old adage, no pain, no gain. I've been a martial artist since I was like a child, right?
Okay.
So if you want to learn martial arts in our school, you're gonna get hit. And if you didn't want to get hit, then go home, which means you don't advance, right? And that's how my mentality on life has been. If I'm not prepared to get hit, then just take my ball and go home and be satisfied with my station in life and keep trading that time for dollars. It all goes together. For me, it's embracing the pain. It's what drives me forward, because I recognize that when you do enough, then you get to a point where it doesn't hurt anymore. It's kind of like
Mm,
working out really hard. You
yeah.
get to a point where you've done enough of it that this is just easy. And I got to comment on a point you made earlier. You're talking about how our friends and family try to hold us down, and how people look at you as you begin to matriculate and move up through life. But and now they think you've made it, so they no longer want to help you. One of my mentors, Leo Hanford, great guy, he actually said to me, so Leo guy is a multi-millionaire, many times over. And brother said to me one time, I said to Leo, I said, Leo, why don't you drive like Mercedes and BMWs and all that stuff? And he just looked at me, kind of smiled, and he said, Greg, he says, I got all that. I said, well, then why don't you drive them? He said, because when I wore a suit and I rode around in a Mercedes, nobody wanted to help me. He says, now I ride around with overalls, work boots, and a pickup truck with my company name on the side of it. Now everybody is willing to help me. And that really stuck with me. That resonated, because and I find that's exactly how it is, that if you look like you're successful
Hmm.
as a black man, that's a no. You want to look like you're needy. And that goes back to that crab in a barrel thing.
Hmm.
So by the time you reach down and want to pull up the next man, which I believe in, you are so well anchored on the side of that barrel that you can reach down and pull up, and they can't pull you down. If you do, you can shake.
Come on.
Because sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to love people from afar.
What you said is so, it just hit me like it probably like it hit you because it's so counterintuitive to our culture, right? Because I see a lot of my white brothers and sisters who are trying to start businesses, and they go to their community and they say, are trying to do this, or I need help moving up. And there's a line of people trying to help them get to that next level, right? That, oh man, you just did this. So great. Okay, let me help you move to that next level. And then, our community, they go, wait a minute, you successful, you're doing okay, you don't need us, you don't need any more, you got this, and you just go, wow, it's not, if we could get to the point where we're going, okay, how do we grab onto the top of that barrel and pull each other up or push each other from the bottom? Because I know if I can get you to that rim and you can hang on to it, you can pull me up at the same time. It's just so amazing that he said that. He's got his truck name on the side of the truck, and he's doing well, even though he doesn't need, after he needed all this stuff. That is so huge. And when I think of this, helping each other and moving people up, how do you deal with the people that just don't get, like, you get somebody that you're mentoring and you're working with them, and they don't want it as bad as you want it for them. Like, the person has potential. They could do it. Whether it's a product, somebody you want to bring up with you, and they got this whole other view based on, I don't know if it's their upbringing or what they believe in themselves, or that stop them and keep them in that stuck position, even though you're trying to help them. How do you do that? Do you just let them go and find somebody else, or help me with that?
So I'm full of stories, so
That's his
you'll
purpose.
have
It
to.
says they're hitting me, they're helping me, so please tell them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in one of my past lives, as I often refer to them, I was a um, a manager for a pharmaceutical company. I ran the IT department, and so I had a couple of direct reports, and I came in behind another guy who his way of staying empowered was to hoard his knowledge. And so he didn't really train the direct reports. They basically would train them in microcosms, little, this is what you need to know, right? And so they were never able to advance. And I had a couple of guys that I decided I was going to teach them about networking, hardcore VLANs, routing, all this stuff. I'm going to really teach them so they can be better at their jobs. One of the guys, it was two guys that I was doing this with, and one of the guys was black, and the other guys was white. And I had to be even-handed because DEI works in reverse too, right? You got inclusion and all
Mhm.
that. So I want to make sure that I did it correctly. The Caucasian brother consumed the knowledge like he was starving. The brother was kind of like, well, all right, I think I've had enough of this now. The Caucasian brother went on and got certified in what I was teaching him.
Mhm.
I talked to the brother. He didn't move. They gave him like a $3 raise at the job where he was. Whereas the Caucasian brother was making, I think he had increased his pay by like 30, 40 grand over
Yeah.
what he was making there. So when I find people that people don't want it, I just shut it down because
Mhm.
if you want something more for a person than they want it, then no matter how much you want it for them, like the old saying, my mom used to say, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
If you don't, and then at that point, what I do is I'm cordial to them when I see them or I speak to them. But as my wife's cousin has said to me, and this is a word I say over and over again, I have to love you from afar. Stay over there,
Oh, I
you do your
love that.
thing. I want you to be well, right? But I can't take time with you to give you something for free that I have earned by putting out actual dollars and blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, and I love how you said that, because if they're not ready, it doesn't matter how much you're going to do and how much time you're going to spend. I'm not saying they can't get ready, and you might send them to places. And like with the program that Journey to Freedom, to me, in our program is all about helping you become the person you need to be in order to do those things to advance. And so there's some habits and things that we need to help you create in order for you to be ready to sit with the Greg Gavin and say, okay, let me be that sponge that can now push me forward, because Greg doesn't have time for me to just sit around and talk about nothing when we're trying to move forward and we're trying to get going. And so I love that, you can say you're not ready yet. You don't even have to tell them you're shutting down. You just shut down, and then they realize, hey, I'm not that person yet. And if they have enough in them to go be ready or ask the right questions, then we can get them to that point. But until they are, then I see so many people trying to work with people who have potential, that really want it, that don't want to put in the work, that don't want to put in the effort, that aren't showing up and learning, and then get so frustrated and come home, upset. As a result, I want to move, with the same mindset, move into, maybe some finances and things, because I think there's a different mindset. I was looking at some statistics of what it took to be in the top 1% of income earners in our country or something. I think that the low floor on that is like $750,000. You're now entering in that top 1%. And then when you hit like 1.3 million, you're in the top 0.01%, 100% or whatever that's in there. But I see so many folks stuck that are using trading those dollars for hours. They're making that between $40,000 to, if they're a mechanic at a Mercedes dealer, maybe they're making 120,000 or 150,000. And then I see people who are bosses that make up to, 180 to 200,000. And, but want to move forward, but they can't. And maybe you can just talk about that mindset of somebody who, whether they own a business or thinking through business or understands money a little bit differently and move forward with making more money than the person who just stays at. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with somebody who is happy at $50,000 a year and feeding their family and doing everything they want. I just see so many people who want more, but can't figure out those little gems or those little things that I believe it's all mindset that changes them to the 300,000, the 500,000, the 700,000, the $1 million. What would you say are some things that you've learned through the years that can help with that mindset?
That money is a tool.
Okay.
That's the very first thing. That money is a tool. As a poor, we didn't grow up with a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't certainly dirt poor, but we were probably blue collar. Both parents worked, owned our home, kind of thing, right? So, and we didn't have problems eating and that kind of stuff. But at that level, we were taught to work, get money, pay your bills, have a good time, right? Then when you start to move higher in the social strata, you're taught to have a good job, to make money, to pay your bills, to have good credit so you can live above your means, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the third and final leg is that yeah, you make money, so the money begins to make you money, be that through investment in real estate, investing in your business, stock markets, money market funds, you name it, right? So a lot of us are not, particularly as Black people, are not taught that money is a tool. We are taught to spend it. And if you look at even the advertisement that comes towards us, there is no, um, we we have generational wealth even when we can. A lot of times is because that generation that had the wealth is taught to spend it, right? And so we don't oftentimes we are a couple of paychecks away from disaster because of that mindset. When you get enough money in, you can really wealthy people live off of the dividends and interest of their money. They don't touch the principal, right? So if you got $10 million in the bank, when you got it in, you say you're getting a 5% return, right? That's $500,000 of yearly income. Now, for the majority of us, by that time you already got your house, you got all your right.
Yeah.
So the majority of us can live very, very well off of $500,000 a year, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But and so at that point they're using their interest from their money and they're able to collateralize that money in a way that they can then go out and even borrow against it without spending the principal to start other ventures that in turn makes more money. We're not taught that. We are taught to spend. You get money, get that new coat, buy that new car, take that trip, go out and get that of scotch or whatever your poison is. That kind of thinking. And I think that is probably the one thing that if you could teach a kid anything, teach them that. My funny story: my kid one time he wanted a video game or something, and I said I don't have the money for that right now. He said, well, just go to the magic money machine and put your card in and get some money out. When he said that, that was an epiphany. It was like ding, like I didn't do my job because this kid is thinking that money is just in there for me to get at random.
Yeah.
So at that point, I back, when the bills came in, I laid my paycheck on the table. I said, "Good, this is how much money went in the bank." And I had one kid open the bills and look at it. I filled out the check, and I had the other kid look at it and check it off on our list of bills, put it in the envelope along with the statement, and put the stamp on it, and then keep deducting. I said, now when it gets down to this amount, this is how much we're going to keep to last us to the next week, next paycheck. And then they got done and said, Daddy, you don't have a lot of money. I said, exactly. Now you understand. They never again said to me, magic money machine. Consequently, the boys are doing very well because that was a lesson that stuck with them. But we need to be taught and teach about money. Don't tell your kid to get out. You're in business. Show them the books, how it works. That's it.
Yeah, and I love how you that middle section of the credit, and how like people who are in this, what I consider to be stuck in some ways is they all want to talk about credit all the time, and how they're, if somebody's bragging about their credit score, they're living to make sure that they have good credit. And so they're living to figure out ways to pay the bills on stuff they probably shouldn't have bought anyways because they couldn't afford it. Right. So they're just perpetual, like, oh, my credit, and then they're worried about it. And then, and they tell me, well, I looked at Credit Karma and I looked at this and I looked at that. And you're saying on the investment side, you brought up, and just, when I'm thinking about mindset, you brought up, if I have $10 million, that spends out $500,000, knowing that $1 million spends out about $50,000 a year of interest, and thinking most people would never even have that conversation with me if you have $10 million in the bank. The folks that are in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and thinking about that $10 million in the bank is such a high bar for some people to think that's even a possibility that could happen. In your business dealings and the things that you did, are there percentages, or and I'm getting a little bit into the weeds a little bit, because I think it's important for some of the people who are listening, and you can be as broad as you like. But when you think about that whole paycheck that came in, and the story you told about your son, and now you think about, hey, I have a business and I'm running a business. Is there a percentage or a certain amount that you're willing to risk? Because you talked about risk earlier. The person who's willing to risk wins, with that amount of money, because, there can be way too much. I'm just risking everything. There can be, I'm not risking anything. And now, therefore, I'm not moving forward. How do you come up with decision, or that formula in your mind that says this is okay about this money, because I'm using this money not to go buy the shiny new car, but I'm using this money to go buy the extra sound system that is going to be deployed out into, the world somewhere during a concert.
Well, that decision making process really kind of goes. How do I just determine? Well, first of all, I always do like a bit of analysis, and then an analysis paralysis. You know,
Mhm.
overthinking, because you had talked about that in the beginning when you were doing your intro. But what I look at it and I was okay, if I have this piece of equipment, or if I get this piece of knowledge, or what is my return on it going to be? Because you want to be smart about it.
Mhm.
And and then that's when I'll just buy that new piece of equipment. I'm not doing sound anymore, by the way. Just doing the managed
Yeah.
services piece. So
Yeah.
the
Okay.
overhead the overhead is just much more gentle, as opposed to
Yeah.
spending $100,000 on a mixing console, which you can do easily. Um, that really is a determinant factor. Is the percentage of return of a return by having this piece of knowledge, or this piece of equipment, or hiring this person, because recognizing that if I don't spend the money, the end result is going to be that I'm again, as we talked about in the very beginning, because I'm afraid to do anything, so I sit there stuck because I'm afraid to make motions. Now, I just got to look back around to what you said about, for some people, the thought of having $10 million in the bank is not even in their wildest dreams. Almost, it's just they can't do it. So Mahatma Gandhi said that the longest journey starts with the first step,
Yes.
right? And so I use that in this particular context to say to you that you don't have to start with a lot of money. You just need to be a consistent saver,
Okay.
and don't act like that pot of money that you set aside is your play money when you get ready. You have to look at it as your seed. Honest to God, like your seed. You know, I, my wife actually saved at once like $25 a paycheck. Well, between the investment and everything, that $25 a paycheck over several years became 60 grand. But that's just consistent. She
Mhm.
just does it. She just does it consistently. Well, this is all I can do is 60. And I try to tell my kids, if you can only do $10, if you put a $10 in and understand compound interest, this is where we had conversations about money.
Mhm.
And I even make jokes about to my kids sometimes. They call me Pop. Hey, Pop, can I borrow $20? Yep. But you know the deal, compound interest, 100% every day. you
Woo!
know, and I'm joking, of course, right?
Yeah.
But when I say that to them, I'll go like 20%, 100%. That's $20. Did 40? Did 80? Yeah. So now you got the picture, But and so I've done these with them, and so I'll say to people that think this can't think that way. There are some savings accounts out there. You don't save it at a bank that's giving you like a 0.5% annually. I mean, you put $100 in there, and they're going to give you what does that work out to be? 0.5% would be like $1,
Mhm.
50 cents for a year. But they're taking your $100 and they use it massively to make money. There are some like high yield accounts out there. Now, I personally like. I don't know if I'm supposed to drop names here, but personally,
Yeah.
one of the ones I use is American Express.
Okay.
American Express high yield savings. Well, point they were paying almost 5%. So if you put $100 in there, you left it in there all year, that's $5. $1,000, that's 50. Now you start over time if that accrue because that again people don't understand the interest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I don't it goes on. I mean, you understand, but so this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. We're not taught
Yeah.
about money as a tool.
Yeah, even with examples, we kind of miss out on. We can say, okay, here's the concept until you actually go down to the bank and stick some money in there and put some, and then see it grow and then add that to it and continue to see how it can compound even a little bit, over time can make such a big difference. You brought up and I'm going to ask you about health and stuff here in a minute, but I, kind of finish with this because I was thinking about you brought up factors and you used it as a determining factor for, how you made a decision. But it really made me think of this past weekend. There's a gentleman out, Myron Golden, who talks about determining and contributing factors, and multimillionaire type, guy that talks about that. And this weekend I was at a NAACP event, and they talked about World War II. They talked about the VA loans that we're giving to our white counterparts compared to the black men who have to get. And it seemed in that whole process there was only like 3 VA loans that were given out to black soldiers at the end of World War II, where that's where our white counterparts started developing what we call generational wealth because they were able to buy houses. And I thought about that as a determining, a contributing factor into somebody's life, but that doesn't determine whether somebody can buy a house now. What I heard in the audience is we're talking about programs now that have down payment assistance, and I 100% believe in housing and getting people into houses and that kind of stuff. But they had this land trust idea where you can get into a house cheaper, but you don't get the whole value of the house. It goes up at a certain percentage because somebody else actually owns the land that the house sits on. And we got into this big argument discussion about how if I try to give that house to my kids, and then my kids try to give it to my grandkids and my great grandkids, they won't take as much interest if it's 4 generations in a affordable housing, program that the land isn't owned on. And I'm talking to myself. I'm going, wait a minute, that's the wrong. This is how you get going. This isn't like 4 generations. I want my family to be in a lower income housing program. At some point you got to move out of it. How, as we're learning and growing, how do we get out of that mindset that if somebody gives us this thing or helps us up a little bit, that we have to stay there? And then how do we teach that no, 4 generations from now your kid should have $1 million homes all over the place and real estate and everything else? Where does that come from? How do we do this?
That's actually what I said in the very first beginning of it. Fear and comfort. You
Yeah.
know, you're living in the house, you're comfortable, you don't have to do anything. The house is probably paid for, so you can just kind of flop. Everybody's it's kind of like a community house, and nobody really takes total responsibility for it, but it's just kind of there. And usually these houses end up looking a hot mess in the end.
Mhm.
I mean, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So they're not taught that. And again, we're not taught the power of what really is generational wealth. I mean, what is that? It sounds great. Does that mean when I drop dead that I'm going to hand you millions of dollars? Well, in some cases, yeah, that could be the case. You know, I may hand you assets that are liquidable, but are not liquid, meaning they're not cash
Right.
that time. But the one thing about if I hand my wife and I've had this conversation. I'm kind of jumping around here, but my wife and I've had this conversation. How would you empower somebody with money who never had money, where the money does not become a detriment?
Ooh, like the
You,
lottery.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
because if you took the average person, a young person,
Uh,
wasn't raised with a lot of money, say their early 20s, and you suddenly laid on them 10 million. See, we already got that number out there, $10 million. Most of them wouldn't do another thing in their entire life.
you're right. You're right.
I'm sent. And those people were ones most likely to be completely broke by the time they're 40,
Oh yeah,
if not before.
absolutely.
You know, and trying to figure out what happened because I had $10 million. I had a lot of money. It's the educational piece that has been left out of us as a people. You know, so to your point, I mean, which is what you were saying there about how do we get move forward? How do we? What is generational wealth? When you get the wealth, what do you do with it? How do you continue to grow the money? How do you change your mindset from being a bill payer spender to an entrepreneur, collector, innovator? This is something that has to be taught because I've been fortunate that I've in my career path here had one company that I worked with, and I'll let them remain nameless, but it was a fifth generation of this family taken over. So the asset that was given to the son wasn't really money. It was this business.
The business.
And it
Yeah.
was left for him to grow. But before he got to the point where the father passed the torch, the kid was there shoulder to shoulder. The father sent the son to business school. He had a degree in business. And then the father began to listen to the son because the son said, well, hey dad, well, let's build this laser facility here using laser beams to do this process. And so the father agreed and spent several millions of dollars to build onto a new building, listening to the son. And it was quite successful. You see, and when that happened, then the father knew that he could pass the torch and it was in good hands because the son was already thinking in the right direction. Uh, so part of it is just like get in the habit of giving your kids some money. Teach them physical responsibility. Like if they want something, let them work up to it. And when they get it, when they spend that money, then don't backstop them because now they want an ice cream cone. No, you made a decision. You spent your money. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You follow me?
Oh,
So, how do we move ourselves forward as a people? We got to start as children because usually with adults, I'm the catch up ball for what I was not given. For people who are truly brought into generational wealth and that wealth is being correctly passed on, they already know what to do with this
mhm.
wealth to continue being wealthy. Otherwise, they will be broke, as we talked about. So, it just giving somebody stuff is not necessarily a good thing. Giving in spirit is the most important piece. It's kind of like that old adage, teach a man to fish, give a man a fish. But this is in a more financial sense. So that is, I think, is the big piece of how we do that. Is just begin to teach our young people what is wealth,
Yeah.
how do you
What is well?
accumulate wealth,
Yeah. Well,
how do you grow this, and then
yeah.
all that goes together.
Just as I was thinking as you were talking, and how much of our educational process is caught. Not necessarily. I can give you the book knowledge, but unless you're doing it, and you were talking about like giving your kids money. How many times have we given our kids allowances, but the allowance didn't come with money parameters. It didn't come with, hey, I'm going to give you $20, but five of it needs to be saved, for a year, or, another portion needs to be invested, another portion. So what you really get to spend is $8 out of the 20 I gave you, or whatever it is. And then really start, that process instead of, I could have just given you $8, but I'm going to give you a little bit extra so I can teach you the principles of what to do with that money over time. I have my daughter has you're putting pennies and coins in jars and spend so much of it. And like, what a great lesson of not just giving the money and saying, the magic ATM machine or the magic machine that you go in and pull money out, and then you spend that money. So really good thoughts. Thanking you for doing that. Wanted to just kind of talk about health a little bit, whether it's mental health or physical health. What are some things that you've done over your lifetime to make sure that your mind is right and you have the ability to go do the ventures that you've wanted to do? You know, I just see, they're saying that the average black man lives to 72 right now. That's our expected age. And I think a lot of it has to do with our mental health, even more so that creates the physical disabilities that sometimes we encounter. How have you been to stay healthy?
First of all, now this is a personal thing, but I stopped eating meat. I was 15 years old. I haven't had
Okay.
a piece since. Being a professional musician at one time, I had to add back in some things. So I do eggs, dairy, and I'm now what would be considered a pescatarian. I eat
Okay.
fish. I'm particular about that. As I alluded to earlier, I've stayed active,
Hmm.
with martial arts and riding bikes, and I pretty much every day. Still can run.
Okay.
And I do sometimes. I could probably run a mile without you know
Too much hurt.
without crumbling.
Yeah.
So that's the first part, and then having a good support team around you. I'm good at quoting people where they're good, they're good. My ex-wife has a saying that if they're not enhancing the quality of your life, you don't need them in your life, right?
Ooh, I love that.
So hey, can we pause a second?
Sure. Let me hit pause real quick. You got it.
All right, because I gotta answer this door. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
apologize.
No problem.
That's one of the physical health is watching what you avoid a whole lot of drug drinking, and that's easier to say than actually done because most of us will imbibe on something at some point. But for particularly in our communities, you can find a liquor store every other block,
Yeah.
and so they're just watching what you eat. Again, in our communities, obesity seems high.
Mm.
Uh, Sometimes we have food deserts, and that's a whole nother conversation where the quality of the food in there is, the bodegas, the little corner stores, sometimes all people have to shop at. And so for me, it's eating. There's having good relationships. I have a great wife. We have a great life. My kids are doing well. I should say our kids are doing well, and nobody's thugged out, drugged out, or incarcerated. So
Love it. Yeah.
that's a wonderful thing, and so that all that leads to mental health and a good position to be able to look up, because when things around you are attention down, it's hard to be a visionary
Hmm.
around you. So that's so it's physical health, mental health, spiritual health. You got to be well grounded, and because you're going to be tried in other areas, so those areas need to be solid because you're going to be tried. You know.
Gotcha. Wow.
So
Well,
that's a big
yeah. Well, thank
deal.
thank you for that. Yeah, we have been chopping it up, and I have so appreciated. Is there anything that we didn't get to talk about as you were thinking about preparing or being on this podcast that you would love to make sure that all the folks who listen to us are able to get or glean from some of your experiences? Is there anything, one, two things that you would love to talk about?
Yeah, because you did mention a couple things that I told you I wrote them down
Mhm.
because it really struck
Yeah.
of your pillars, of your five pillars here. If I would add anything, it would be relationship, community, and that's
Okay.
kind of like one-on-one, and purpose. You know, uh, because you have to be driven in what you want to do on the purpose part, and relationships is just those are the things that support us and what we're attempting to do, which is obviously tenuous and emotionally and mentally dangerous, because we're trying something that nobody else is trying, and we're going to have all those hits we talked about in the beginning of people telling you, well, you need to go find a job, boy, all those kind of things up front. So you need to have a good, solid cheering squad, and there's sometimes people telling you that, hey, what was done.
Mhm.
Somebody going to check you and give you honest feedback. So those are probably the two things that I want to make sure I bring up, and having a sense of purpose. That you're comfortable with it in your skin, and you have an idea of where you want to be. You may not know how you're going to get there, but at least hey, I know I want to be in California. Now how I'm going to get to be another story, but I know I'm going. That kind of mentality. So in this case, we're talking more of structure and that kind of thing, but certainly.
How do you know that you're living in your purpose? Like you finally got there. That you're, I'm not saying you're. I don't know if it'll ever be 100%. This is my purpose. All I'm going to ever do. But how do you know when you get to that point where you're living in your purpose?
We live what?
Living in your purpose.
How do you feel see change that you are having an impact on others as well as yourself? And, because for me, it's always been about uplifting not just me, but those around me, my sphere. So it's a team effort.
Yeah.
I push on them, they push on me. Uh, and that's when things are working right because I have a sense of purpose that and excite those around me, and so I get that belief. Everybody is believing and pushing in the same direction, and when you get that, that's a very very powerful thing, and that they're going to support you, and you support them, and everybody rises to the top.
Oh, I like that. As you were speaking, it came to mind when I was a PE teacher and a coach at the school, and every now and then I'd have to in like the physics class or something like that. And I think about my purpose, right? I could do a lot with an athlete and help an athlete to be the best they can be. When I was in physics class, that wasn't my purpose. That was nothing that I was going to do or excited about to help somebody get there. It doesn't matter what community I was in. That was not fulfilling my purpose. Not that physics is important and not that I don't understand how things move and motion and that kind of stuff, but that I could tell you right then I was absolutely not living in purpose when I was doing that. Greg, I thank you for being a part of this. I hope we get to, at some point, maybe even do some groups type things where we get some folks together and mentor folks and put some people together. I'm taking a group of men. You mentioned Alabama at the beginning of the show. So I'm taking this, at least at the beginning of the year, 14 men down to, we're going to start out in Birmingham and do a civil rights thing there. And then we'll go to Selma and do the Bettis Bridge and talk about that. And then we'll end up in Montgomery at the Brian Stevenson Equal Justice Museum, and just excited about we're going to do it with story and purpose, and we will talk about some of the things that you've talked about today. Some of the things that I got almost 3.5 pages of notes from the things that you said today. That will be part of our program. So I just want you to know that your legacy, it will continue to move forward. And the folks that watch this, whether you're subscribed to this or you're, hit the bell, whatever it is, there are such good interviews and people that are sharing knowledge that you can take. And so I hope you'll take this episode. You will have written down many notes. If not, watch it several times. We'll get Greg back. There's more that he has to share that we will learn from. So again, thank you for being part of the Journey to Freedom podcast, and we'll look forward to talking to you and everybody else on the next one. You guys have a wonderful day. Don't forget, you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to, and we'll talk to you on the next one. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.